Zhang Yi, Ma Zhong, and Zhang Yi were three well-respected military generals of the Shu kingdom. Zhang Yi and Ma Zhong often worked together as they dealt with calming the local tribes living around Shu's borders. Zhang Yi and Zhang Ni had different reactions to Jiang Wei's northern campaigns. Yi strongly opposed the invasions, but loyally participated in them anyway. Ni, who was growing old, saw them as an opportunity to repay his lord's kindness or to die trying. Zhang Ni has been compared to the likes of Huang Xuan and Wang Ping, and how they all seized opportunities when they arose and left strong legacies. He spent at least 18 years dealing with domestic uprisings around Ba Commandery, and only entered the Shu central government after numerous petitions. Zhang Yi is comparable to Liao Hua and Zhong Yu, in how they were some of the few officials who served Shu Han throughout its entirety. He steadily rose through the ranks to become one of Shu's top generals. He was also a descendant of the famous Zhang Liang, one of the three heroes of the early Han dynasty, famed for his great contributions in founding the Han Empire. Ma Zhong of the Ma clan was known for being generous and whimsical, but still decisive in how he handled affairs. Zhong's duties in the south of Shu have been compared to Deng Zhi's in the east and Wang Ping's in the north. There were no recorded birth dates for any of their men, but they were all born in what would become the Shu kingdom, in Ba, Baxi, and Jianwei commanderies respectively. When Ma Zhong was a child, he was adopted by his mother's side of the family, and so went by the name Hu Du. In time, he returned his surname back to Ma, and took the name Zhong, and between the years 196 and 220, he became a commandery clerk. He stood out as filial and incorrupt whilst dealing with civil affairs, which allowed him to be nominated as a Xiao Lian. He was then sent out as the chief of Han Chang. Zhang Ni was an orphan when he was young, and despite living in poverty, he managed to earn himself a reputation for being strong and generous. In his early career, he served as an officer of merit in his local county, then distinguished himself when Liu Bei invaded Yi province. Bandits used this opportunity to raid the unprotected county office, which put the local magistrate's wife in great danger. Zhang Ni engaged the bandits in close combat and protected her. He became famous for his courage and in time was summoned to the commander's office, then promoted to serve as an assistant officer. During his time in this role, Zhang Ni befriended two scholars with higher ranking and salary than him, Gong Lu and Yao Zhu. They were famous and had good reputations. Ni's own reputation earned their respect, hence they became friends. After Liu Bei became the new provincial governor, he employed Zhang Yi to serve as a scribe. He was nominated as a Xiaolian some point between 196 and 220, and became a county chief. He went on to become a prefect before being promoted to the administrator of Zitong. In 219 he served under Zhao Yun in the later part of Liu Bei's Hanzhong campaign, where they scored a great victory against Tao's forces at the Battle of Han River. Zia Haoyuan had just been killed at Mount Dingjun, so Tao countered by attacking the Shu camp south of the Han River. Huangzhong and Zhao Yun were ordered to its defence, so Huang led men at night to destroy the way supplies, whilst Zhao Yun and Zhang Yi protected the camp in case he didn't return. With no sign of them by noon the next day, Zhao Yun rode out to find Huangzhong, whilst Zhang Yi remained behind. Later, when scouts reported to him that Zhao Yun was on his way back with Wei troops in pursuit, he closed the gates in order to prepare for combat. Upon his return, Zhao Yun opted for the open fort strategy by opening the gates, silencing the drums and removing the banners. He placed his archers and crossbowmen covering the area outside the gate, but Tao's men began to retreat as they suspected an ambush. Zhang Yi was part of the all-out charge that pushed the Wei troops towards the Han River and forced many of them to fall in and drown. In 222, Liu Bei suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of Yiling against Wu. To assist in replacing the losses, the local administrator of Baxi gathered 5,000 soldiers from the various counties and put them under Ma Zhong's command to lead them to Liu Bei. Liu Ba, who was assisting Bei in handing out suitable rewards without draining the treasury, recommended that he personally goes and meet Ma Zhong. After the meeting, Liu Bei told Ba, "Though I lost Huang Chuan, I gained Hu Du. This shows that the world has no lack of talent." These talents would be recognized by Zhuge Liang in the year 223 after Liu Bei passed away. Zhong was appointed as commander beneath the gates and impressed Liang with his conduct. 2 years later, Yongkai's rebellion in the south triggered Zhuge Liang's southern campaign. Ma Zhong accompanied him here and led troops from Bedao to defeat Zhu Bao. After he captured Jiangqi, he was appointed as the administrator of it. He then rendezvoused back up with Zhuge Liang and Li Hui, where they successfully pacified the rest of the Nanzhong region. Ever since the commander-deputy Zhu Bao revolted, Shanghai had been in turmoil and constant revolt. When Ma Zhong arrived, it was an unruly place, but he soon quelled the rebels and pacified the region. As administrator, his policies helped the commandery recover massively. He brought harmony to the local government and earned the kindness of the people. This naturally gave him great authority over the next 5 years as he continued to restore peace and prosperity to Zhang Yi. He was relocated in 230 during the build-up to Zhuge Liang's northern campaigns, where he assisted in organising the defences of Shu, whereafter he was rewarded with the title Advisor in Provincial Internal Government. Whilst Zhuge Liang was assembling forces for his campaign, local bandits pillaged villages in Hanzhong, Guanghan, and Mianzhu commanderies. Zhang Yi currently held the rank of an acting commandant, so he took the initiative and led his troops to deal with the bandits, but they spread out and scattered when they heard of his approach. He pulled a red wedding on the bandits, pretending to extend the offer of marriage to the leaders to coax them out of hiding. When they attended the banquet to celebrate the peace, Zhang Yi ordered his men to kill them all before sending his troops to hunt down the rest. The massacre lasted around 10 days, after which the area was pacified. Zhang Yi soon fell seriously ill though, and due to his low status he could not afford proper treatment. The local administrator, Zizhi, was a talented doctor and a generous man. Knowing of Ni's reputation and wanting to appease him, Xi did not spare any expenses in his attempts to bring him back to health. After several years of recovery, the illness was finally cured, and they both remained good friends after this. In 231, whilst Zhang Yi was still recovering, Zhang Yi and Ma Zhong were utilised by Zhuge Liang. Ma Zhong went to meet with him in person to assist against the foreign Qi Shan tribes and helped him with military affairs. Zhang Yi was appointed as the area commander of Liang to replace Li Hui, who had left to serve in the northern campaigns. Tasked with maintaining peace in the Southlands whilst the armies were away, Zhang Yi proved to be very unpopular compared to his predecessor. He lacked the flexibility to adapt the Shu code of law to the local conditions. He became hated by the masses during his time here. By 232, Zhang Yi had completely recovered, then was promoted to an officer of the standard for how he had dealt with the bandits before. He was then placed under Ma Zhong's command. The two of them together earned quite a reputation for dealing with the restless local tribes. They quickly dealt with some Xiang tribes in Wenshan Commandery from Mount Wen. Zhang Yi first led his unit of only 300 men and horses as the vanguard. They arrived at the village of Tali first, but it was difficult to reach as it was atop a mountain. Zhang Yi had to climb the mountain before setting up his camp a short distance from the village. The Xiang had set up a stone gate before the village, which had an elevated platform atop it. They had also collected stones to resist the Shu attacks, which they planned to use to crush their enemies. Zhang Yi judged that an attack would be complicated, and so instead sent an emissary to intimidate them, which scared them into submission. All of you, the tribes of Wen Mountain, have rebelled and done harm to the innocents. Hence, Heaven's Son ordered us at once to quell and destroy the evil. However, if you bow your heads and permit the army to pass, giving provisions and supplies, then you may enjoy good fortune and eternal prosperity, and you'll be repaid 100-fold. But if to the end you do not obey, then the great army will have no choice to arrive and suppress you, like a lightning bolt striking down, and though then you may repent, it will be too late. Upon hearing this, the village elders rushed out to meet Zhang Yi to let him pass. They even provided him with provisions. The other pockets of Xiang tribes became confused and terrified when they learned that Tali had fallen. Many welcomed the army and surrendered, whilst the others fled into the valleys. Ma Zhong and Zhang Yi then hunted those that fled and achieved total victory. In 233, Zhang Yi's inability to appease the people eventually caused a rebellion amongst the southern tribes. Liu Zhu rose up and gained the support of many chieftains, which disturbed most of the commanderies in the area. Zhang Yi was summoned back to the capital, with the already proven Ma Zhong being sent to replace him. Yi's followers urged him to follow his orders and to leave right away. He refused and said, "No, I have been recalled to Chengdu because I failed in my duty to prevent the barbarians from rebelling. However, as my successor has yet to arrive, and because we're near the war zone, I should make preparations for stockpiling and transporting supplies so as to ensure that my successor will have adequate resources to quell the revolt. How can I neglect my role in public affairs just because I've been relieved of my command?" He directed his soldiers to transport supplies to a staging area for Ma Zhong's troops, and kept them on high alert until he arrived. Ma Zhong, who had been mandated with defeating Liu Zhu, soon arrived with Zhang Yi at the forefront of his army, as he always was. Thereupon they led the armies to defeat the rebels, where Zhang Yi beheaded Liu Zhu. Ma Zhong was granted a marquisate title of Boyang village and further promoted for his victory in pacifying the south. Zhuge Liang later recognized and praised Zhang Yi's actions for how he assisted Ma Zhong with supplies. After Liu Zhu's death, more tribes revolted, so Ma Zhong sent Zhang Yi with an army to put them down. He enticed many of them to surrender, and quickly gained 2,000 men who were all transferred north to Han Zhong's military command. Earlier, during Yongkai's rebellion, they killed the local administrator of Xuanling Commandery and then kidnapped and sent his successor Zhang Yi, courtesy named Zhun, to Wu. This led to the local commander garrisoning away in fear in Pingyi County. When Ma Zhong took over though, he refused to do this, instead relocating his headquarters to Wei County, among the Han population and foreigners. Due to the turmoil in the region, Yuzi Commandery had become a long-lost territory. Zhuge Liang had sent Gonglu to assert authority over it during the southern campaign, but he had been killed. The locals were so hostile that any other appointed administrators would not enter Yuzi Commandery, instead residing in Anshan County, over 250 miles away, and so could not assume office. After a discussion was held by the Shu government, it was decided that Zhang Yi should be Yuzi's new administrator. He arrived with his men and began generous treatment of the foreigners, who began to slowly return to submission. The northern region of Zhuomar, however, was the most rebellious. They were stalwart and strong, and would not submit to authority so easily. He led his men and defeated them in battle, but made sure to keep their leader, Wei Lang, alive. Ni memorialized to the imperial court that Lang should be granted a city marquis title, and have his tribe of 3,000 households officially recognized. When the other tribal chieftains heard that this was granted, they gradually surrendered, whereafter Zhang Yi was rewarded the title of secondary marquis. Whilst Zhang Yi was preoccupied in Zhuomar, Dongfeng and his younger brother Shu, who had previously surrendered, decided to rebel once again. After Zhang Yi defeated them, he put Dongfeng to death, and began to look after his unnamed wife, who are referred to as Lady Liang. She was a daughter of the ruler of the prominent local Maonui tribe. Shu managed to escape and fled for the western frontier, where he rallied the remnants of his tribe. As he was a fierce and strong warrior, he was deeply feared by them. He sent 2 of his close relatives to surrender to Zhang Yi, but in reality it was to obtain information. Zhang Yi knew what they were really up to, and so showered them in gifts, and then managed to convince them to kill Shu themselves. The Hanjia county's border contained Maonui tribes of over 4,000 households. Their leader, Lang Lu, held a grudge against Zhang Yi for the deaths of Dongfeng and his brother Shu, as Lady Liang was the aunt of Lang Lu. He then sent his uncle Lang Li to take command of Dongfeng's remnant army in order to rescue his sister. Zhang Yi observed the attacking enemy army for a while, before deciding to send his own relative with gifts and ox to seek peace. As a sign of his good intentions, he released Lady Liang back to her family, who was overjoyed to be with her brother again. Lang Li led his men to surrender to Zhang Yi, where they received many gifts. Upon returning to Hanjia, they were then tasked with convincing the other Maonui to surrender, who they managed to persuade to submit entirely. There was an old road that led from Yuezhi to Chengdu, but it had been cut off and not used for over a century, and its lack of use had left it in good condition. As it went through Maonui territory, Zhang Yi sent his attendants and ambassadors to meet with Lang Lu and also Lady Liang to see if they could reopen the road. Lang Lu led his brothers, wives and children to go and meet with Zhang Yi, where they swore an oath of allegiance and committed to reopening the road. The results cleared the pathways of around 300 miles of road. They also restored former relay stations, which allowed for communication between Chengdu and the west once more. For his assistance, Ni wrote to the court that Lang Lu should be made the king of Maonui Guopi, whilst at the same time, Lang Lu sent a letter of formal surrender to Shu. Next, Zhang Yi turned his attention to the Du Shi, whose leader had earlier killed Gong Lu. Zhang Yi raised an army which he used to capture Li Qiu Cheng. He then read out his crimes and had him executed. Due to the constant tribal raids, much of Yuezhi's infrastructure was damaged. During Zhang Yi's first 3 years of his 15-year tenure, he initiated a building project to have the city walls repaired to protect the people. Most of the work was done by foreign and local tribes. Among the men and women, everyone worked their hardest to help Zhang Yi rebuild. There were 3 counties over 100 miles away from Yuezhi's headquarters. They provided important commodities like salt, iron, and liqueur, but they had been seized by the foreign tribes. When Zhang Yi arrived to reclaim them, he struggled to capture one of the counties, Dingzhu. The chieftain's leader, Hao Lang Sen, hated Zhang Yi so much for his invasions, they refused to even meet with him. Zhang Yi sent tens of his strongest men to capture and beat Houhanshu to death. His body was sent back to the tribes along with generous rewards, which detailed Houhanshu's crimes and read, "Do not rush mindlessly into action. If you act, you will be exterminated." The foreigners dirtied their faces and bound themselves to apologize for their crimes, so Zhang Yi rewarded them by killing an ox for a great feast and did not harm them. His grace and trust had been reaffirmed among the tribes, and the production of salt, iron and tools were all provided for. Ma Zhong led the vanguard of Zhang Yi in a victorious attack against some rebels and also helped in bringing the old commandery back. For his exemplary work in the west, Zhang Yi was made general who settles military affairs. In 234, at the Battle of Huayang Plains, Zhang Yi served as the chief controller of the vanguard. He was also appointed as the nominal administrator of Fang Commandery, which was under Wei control. When Zhuge passed away during the battle, Zhang Yi was appointed as the vanguard army commander and received further peerage for his contributions in the south. At around 236, a prominent Di tribesman, Fu Jian, offered to submit to Shu, so Jiangwan sent Zhang Wei to greet them. After an over-expected amount of time passed, Jiangwan started to worry. Zhang Yi was at Chengdu at the time and tried to calm him by saying, "Fu Jian's request to join us was sincere, and certainly his mind has not changed. However, it's common knowledge that Fu Jian's younger brother is sly and treacherous. Moreover, the foreign Di tribes have trouble working together, so there's likely been changes and unusual circumstances that have delayed Zhang Wei and forced him to remain longer to accomplish his task." After a few days, it was learned Zhang Yi's prediction was correct. Fu Jian arrived with Zhang Wei to join Shu, whilst Jian's younger brother had led most of the tribes to join the state of Tao Wei. In 238, Zhang Yi was reassigned to Chengdu to serve as the master of writing. Whilst he was here, he observed that Fei Yi was unrestrained in how he carelessly showed favour. He warned him in a letter that read, "In the past, Sen Peng was a great commander, wielding the staff of authority, but was killed by an assassin. Now you, wise general, occupy a position of great power and importance, and should reflect on past events. You should act less carelessly and be on guard." Fei Yi was indeed killed by the surrendered general from Wei, Guo Ziyu, who had been recruited by Jiang Wei. It was a short period of time until Zhang Yi was sent back to the front line to serve as the area commander of Jian Wei. His new appointment came with a promotion and an increase in his marquis title. By the year 242, the Nanzhong region was a calm territory, so Ma Zhong was recalled back to Chengdu. Jiangwan planned to attack Wei along a water route. He believed the reason Zhuge Liang had failed before was because the mountainous terrain made it difficult to transport supplies. Many court officials were against this idea and convinced the emperor that it was too risky, as a retreat would be a lot harder on the Han River. Ma Zhong was transferred to Hanzhong to deliver the letter that refused this plan to Jiangwan and to help oversee the defences against Wei. When Wang Ping and Fei Yi commanded defences against Tao Shuang's invasion at the Battle of Xingxi in 244, Ma Zhong remained in Hanzhong and governed it well in Fei Yi's absence. Upon his return, he sent Ma Zhong back south, where he kept the lands peaceful for the next 5 years. Whilst he was administering the south, he showed kindness to those afar and helpfulness to those close to him. To everyone he showed great concern and magnanimity. For his efforts he attained a position no other governor in the south would attain, senior general who guards the south. He passed in the year 249 and was greatly mourned by all of the people of Lixiang, foreign clans and Han peoples alike. After his death, the people of the south built a shrine to him and would pray to him in times of hardship. From the year 2521, Zhuge Ke, the Grand Tutor of Wu, began raising massive armies to attack Wei. A Shu palace attendant and son of Zhuge Liang, Zhuge Zhan, was also Zhuge Ke's younger cousin. Zhang Yi wrote a letter to Zhuge Zhan that read, "The ruler of the east, Sun Xuan, has just perished, and the new emperor Sun Liang is truly young and weak. The Grand Tutor has received a heavy burden of trust, and how can that be considered easy? In the past, I always heard that Sun Xuan never gave the authority to kill or bestow rewards or punishments to his subordinates. Yet now, because of his death, he has entrusted all future affairs to the Grand Tutor. That is truly worrisome. The lands of Wu and Shu are vulnerable, and in the past this has been noted. Yet the Grand Tutor has left the young ruler and walks instead to face the enemies in his stronghold. I fear this is not a good plan for the long term. Though it's said that the eastern country is ordered and solemn, and that those of high positions and low positions are all harmonious, is not even one loss out of 100 something the wise should consider? The past has led to now, and what happens now follows the past. If your honour does not go forward to give loyal advice to the Grand Tutor, who else is there to speak freely to him? Tell him to withdraw the army and develop agriculture, handle affairs with virtue and kindness, and within several years, both East and West will develop together, then it will not be too late. I hope you will thoroughly consider this. Zhang Yi's foresight was such and often right, as Zhuge would indeed lose his influence after his losses at the Battle of Hefei in the year 253. Under his care, Yuezhi became a peaceful region, and he repeatedly asked to return to Chengdu as he felt his mission was done. His request was finally granted, and when he departed, both the Han and ethnic people were so deeply attached to him they grabbed onto the wheels of his carriage, wept and sobbed when they learned of his departure. As he journeyed through the Maonui lands using the road that he and Lang Lu repaired together, they met once more. Lang Lu was carrying his child on his back and followed Zhang Yi to the border. When they got there, Lang sent an escort of 100 warriors to send a tribute to Chengdu along with him. When Zhang Yi arrived in 254, he was made general who defeats bandits and was well received by many. Some criticised him for being too lax in morals and lacking in courtesy, but nevertheless scholars everywhere knew him to be generous and heroic. He happened upon Ziyahao Ba one time who wanted to befriend him. Zhang Yi's response has been praised and used as an anecdote for his character. He answered, "I do not yet know you, and you do not yet know me. When great principles lead elsewhere, how can you speak of confiding feelings? Let us after 3 years speak again." In the year 254, a magistrate from Wei reached out to Liu Shan with desires to surrender over to them. Jiang Wei wanted to use this chance to launch his 7 northern attack, but many officials were worried it could be a ruse. Zhang Yi, however, believed that the secret informant Li Jian's defection was sincere, and managed to convince Liu Shan to agree to Jiang Wei's plan. Zhang Yi in his old age suffered from joint pain and needed a crutch to stand. When the army set out, many soldiers thought he should go back and wouldn't be able to keep up. He begged to unleash all that was left of his strength to reach the enemy. He faced the soldiers and said to Liu Shan, "I, your servant, served you, enlightened sage, and received excessive grace. Moreover, my body is ill, and I am always afraid that one morning I shall fail you and fail to repay the honour I have received. The world under heaven disobeys your wishes and must be settled with military affairs. If Liang province is settled, then I, your servant, will be your defence and guard the border. If victory cannot be won, then I will sacrifice my body as recompense." Liu Shan shed tears upon hearing this and permitted him to go on the campaign. Zhang Yi was correct in his assessment as Li Jian surrendered the Dao over to Jiang Wei. They pressed on to the Battle of Xiangwu, where Zhang Yi led a unit to attack Zizhi and managed to make him retreat, but lost his life in the process. It's recorded that those he killed and injured were also numerous. Jiang Wei continued the fight, which led to the death of Zhuge. Zhang Yi's death was mourned such that none among the Han or foreign clan of Yuezhi did not weep with grief. A temple was established for him. People would bring offerings to the temple even in times of hardship or famine. Chen Shou gave Zhang Yi the following appraisal: "I have observed Zhang Yi's behaviour, appearance and speech. It cannot frighten, but his tactical abilities are considerable, and his intensity is indeed enough to establish his authority. As a servant he was loyal and devoted to integrity. He is of a clear and upright nature, and when he acts he always considers the law." Liu Shan deeply esteemed him and compared him to the heroic warriors of the ancient past. He was not so far. The following year, Zhang Yi returned to the capital for a meeting regarding Jiang Wei's 8th campaign. He strongly opposed the idea by pointing out that Shu lacked the resources and that the people were tired of war. Zhang Yi was reassigned in order to participate in the campaign despite his disagreements. The initial conflict at Dideo was a crushing defeat for Wei. It led to Wang Jing getting besieged in the city, whilst tens of thousands of soldiers fled, with many being forced into the river. Zhang Yi correctly realised the supply problems Shu faced, and advised Jiang Wei that it's time to stop. We shouldn't advance any further, or we'll risk losing everything we have gained so far. This angered Jiang Wei greatly, so Zhang Yi compared marching on to adding legs to a snake. The phrase adding legs to a snake derives from an idiom of a man involved in a snake drawing contest. He finished his picture early, but instead of submitting it, he spent time adding legs to it. He lost the contest in the end, and the moral of the story is to not do unnecessary things and end up ruining what you set out to do in the first place. Jiang Wei continued his assault anyway, but failed to breach Dideo's defences. When news of Chen Tai's reinforcements arrived, Jiang Wei gave up on the fortress and retreated. Despite the two not getting along very well, Jiang Wei still brought Zhang Yi along with him in the future, and he reluctantly had to participate in the campaigns. In 259, Zhang Yi was promoted to the position of Left General of Chariots and appointed as the nominal inspector of Jing province. 4 years later, during Wei's conquest of Shu, Zhang Yi led his troops to resist the invaders and stationed at Yang'an Pass with Dongjian. He later made his way to the heavily fortified mountain pass Jianji to meet up with Jiang Wei, where they held off against Zhonghui's forces. When news of Liu Shan's surrender came in, they formally surrendered over to Zhonghui at Fu County. He returned to Chengdu on the 29th of February 264 with Zhonghui and the others. On March the 3rd, Zhonghui rebelled with the aid of Jiang Wei, but many officers were unwilling to participate, so they turned against the pair. Zhang Yi was one of the men who also lost his life in the coming chaos. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.